Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this evening's episode. The title is Echo of the Human Pattern Beyond Humanity, and I wanted to speak about the traveling routes of the future traveling route of the human concept. This was an episode that a few days ago I attempted, but it wasn't recorded, so I will be attempting it again. And excuse any additional noises. I find that the concepts are the priority of this episode more than anything else. So, I've made some notes here, and then I'm going to explain how the talk is going to go from the past towards the future. I've written here that the human genetics is being passed down, but the genetics comes with behavior, and the behaviors of human beings may be extended to other species and other life forms and beyond. And before I dive into this episode, I want to say that I want the audience to consider that I'm one human being out of 8 billion human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and this nowhere is so vast that it is considered that there is a billion trillion stars in the universe. So this episode is being spoken by a very small part of this cosmic event. And I find it, to be honest, the responsibility of every human being to figure out what's going on here and attempt to wonder how the future generations will emerge, how will our species currently walk into its own future. I want to begin from the past. You see, at least as one person, when I look at this world, I realize that first there's a space, and then there's matter, there's stuff in this space, and this stuff is moving. And as this stuff moves in this space, it changes, and its change is pinpointed, you can say, through the blueprint of time. And so we consider that there was a past, there is a present right now where I'm talking, and then there will be a future. When we look at the past, we actually are starting from the present. Every person is. We are born, and then the questions arrive in our minds, and then our lifetimes becomes the answers to those questions. And just another additional note, usually in these episodes I am focusing on metaphysics, but in this episode I am in some sense focusing on metaphysics, but mainly I'm thinking of the future of the human species. So anybody who this episode you feel you're not aligned to, feel free to move on. And if you're a long-time listener, please consider also supporting the channel through membership. So, to begin. So right now, we are considering ourselves an evolutionary creature. Or let me say it like this, we're a biological creature. That means when our eyes open, we see a biological body. And we also see a psychology to this body, but before, when we look at the past helps us explain how our body got here. And our mind still remains more of a mystery than our body. That means there's a reason, there's the hard problem of consciousness. Now, when we look at it, we are a physical, biological entity, creature. So, in some sense, I would say that we're starting from a study of biology. So we look at the biology and we see that every human being has a psychology, and so where's that psychology coming from? We see that it is coming from the brain. The brain takes us towards the understanding of evolution, and to explain this, of course, you can visit your local scientist, evolutionary biologist, but I will attempt to give it an explanation. There's this concept of heredity. So pretty much on the surface of this planet, there is something being passed down like a torch, but it is of genetical design. Now, when we talk about genetics, so when you look at a human being is made up of cells. When you look at the cell, every cell has a nucleus. When you look at the nucleus, there are chromosomes inside the nucleus. And inside the chromosome, there is a DNA. Now, when we're wondering about not only how human beings are here, but how are they different and how are there so many different kinds of species on this planet, we zoom in on this notion of evolution. So we're looking at the biology first. And so in biology, or in heredity, there is the concept of recombination and there's the concept of mutation. Recombination is suggesting that how we have different human beings arising, and we say how everybody has a different DNA, unique DNA. It's as if they are 50% of the mother's DNA and 50% of the father's DNA are in some sense recombining. So it's as if the DNA is a combination of two different types of DNA. And this DNA can also be influenced by various factors, where this is where the idea of mutation comes in. So imagine, this is a complex view, I guess, where if a mother is smoking cigarettes, right, something happens to the DNA of that child, or how in some sense the chromosomes function. Now, there's factors that can change the DNA, and the DNA is being recombined, and that's how it's being passed on. And then there is also the environment, and the environment brings in the notion or the idea of natural selection. The natural selection, you can say, is as if, I'll give you a very incredible, great story that will paint the picture, but I will say it like this, that the environment, the creature adjusts to the environment, but if the creature cannot adjust to the environment based on its design, it's as if nature selects it out of existence, I would say. It's as if natural selection is in some sense as if those who made it and those who didn't. If some of our ancestors didn't make it, in some sense we can say that it was not their fault, it was the environment's fault. It was nature's fault also, So there's this story, this is called, it's not per se a story, it's a finding, but there's a group of birds called finches, okay? And they call them Darwin finches because Darwin discovered this. And so there was this island where these group of birds, this species of birds, you can say, was in some sense pushed by a storm. Somehow they ended up going onto an island where there was in some sense a lot of food and not predators, so it was like a sort of heaven for these birds, a sort of paradise. Now these finches, these birds, they are there and they start reproducing in some sense. Life is good for them. And so they start overpopulating, and they overpopulate to a point where suddenly the resources that are there for these birds on that island become scarce. Now, something is very important to pay attention to is that a point about the story of these birds, these finches, is that some of these birds, first of all, when there's overpopulation, birds that were in some sense friendly to one another, they become competitors, as if the scarcity of the resources and the urge to want to continue to exist is more powerful than the bond of just a sort of harmony with one's fellow species member. So what happens is there's a conflict between these birds. Now something unique happens. Some of these birds have what you call nut-cracking beaks, and some of them have, think of it this way, some of these birds had wider beaks, they're of the same species, but by design, in accordance to how they appeared, some of them had more rounder beaks and others had more of a pointy needle-like beak. Okay, and so what happens is that because the resources are scarce, they end up kind of being divided, where the birds which have thinner beaks, they needle-like beaks, they start in some sense consuming worms in the ground, and those birds who have more of a, let's say, wider beak, they begin like cracking like almonds or whatever, like they start eating they're focused on that specific food. So based on their design and their placement in an environment and the possibilities available in the environment, they go towards what their design permits. And so from these two arise two different birds, where if you were to see a parrot is like one lineage, that's the nut-cracking beak lineage, and so in some sense, you see a crow, it is more of the other, the more worm-finding beak, you see. So I'm trying to say that the environment has an influence also on how the genetics advance. Now, this is the evolution point. So evolutionary wise, we can get a sense that there was a creature, okay, and this creature adjusted to its environment, it survived, it reproduced, and so now the human species is here. But there's greater mysteries. There is something they say that what the biologist can't answer, the chemist can answer. And what the chemist can't answer, the physicist can answer. So let's go to this picture of a human being, and a human being looks at their biology, they looks at their brain, they have a sense of how their biology has been shaped and sculpted so far. But now the person who has a brain that is in some sense leading towards the psychology, or we say the psychology is a projection of the brain. So suddenly it's as if, let's say the psychology to be a sort of subjective life. This subjective life is coming from the objective life. The objective life is evolutionary. Then we see, wait a minute, it's more like neurons, which are still in biology, but I would say it's becoming more of a chemical view on how the brain is functioning. So it's as if the brain is a jar of chemicals, and these chemicals lead to a sort of reaction where it's like lightning storms are going on in the brain, in the sense of, let's say, neural synapses and whatever. So from the chemistry where we see, okay, even it's as if like the Buddhists thought it was like let's say a soul, I shouldn't say soul, but like there's a sort of self that is reincarnating. From the chemist's view, everything like what we see as civilization, humans, is pretty much the reincarnation of the periodic table. It's as if it's not a soul that's reincarnating, it's a periodic table. that's reincarnating. Even though Buddhism doesn't have a concept of soul in that sense, it's more in the yogic. They say that Buddhism is like the last chapter of yoga, but in the earlier chapters of yoga, there is the reincarnation of this notion of an individual soul, where they consider it as Atma. But anyways, I'll get to that later. So, what we see as human psychology, we are saying it's the hallucin. What we see as meaningful human psychology, we see it to be a sort of hallucination of meaningless chemicals. Now, it's as if every person is the periodic table. That means somebody who's afraid of somebody else, you're afraid of the periodic table. From the chemist's view, Somebody who loves someone else, you have fallen in love with the periodic table, Now, this goes towards physics, where physics is wondering about the forces and the circumstances that lead to the earliest chemicals. And so from the physical perspective, we have this theory of the Big Bang, and the Big Bang, it was as if, I believe it was the Hubble telescope, which noticed background radiation in the sky, and so it was as if we have this notion that there was this explosion out of nowhere, but it was like a potential pool of energy that suddenly actualized through the explosion. And so in what they call cosmic inflation, it's like in a very short time the whole universe cooled down towards manifestation. So it was as if something, because when we look at it, when we look at, in some sense, this, when you look at a particle, let's say right now I have, steaming cup of coffee in front of me, I can notice the steam. Now, this is in some sense a suggestion that particles at different temperatures have different structures. Right? So it's as if when something is hotter, the particles are moving faster. When something, for example, water freezes, the particles are moving slower. There is still vibration, a sort of subtle vibration at its core, even though there is the suggestion that 99% of the atom is empty. But it's as if there is something still dynamic. Okay? So it's as if the universe started at a state where there were subtler particles, and these particles were moving so fast that it was as if there was no shape. It appeared as nothing, and then as it cooled down, there came format, there came structure, and in cosmic inflation, what is it, like less than a second, there was endless universe, planets, galaxies, and whatnot manifested. I mean, to some degree, not all. There's a chart. Let me show it to you. This is all happening over a very long range of time from the consideration of this original explosion. And those particles that are too subtle, I totally forgot to say it. It's quantum, a sort of quantum state, you can say. You see, we have quantum physics explaining the small, the micro, and we have Einstein's relativity explaining the macro. So, if people look at the wallpaper, you'll see this picture. Oh my God, okay here. You get a sense of the Big Bang, you see, and from there what happened towards the quantum fluctuations, and then they became, there was cosmic inflation, and then there was something to see. And so this is very important because it's suggesting that our earliest ancestor is potential energy, a potential energy that cannot be formulated, even though we give it names such as quantum fluctuations and whatnot, or string theory, Another approach was perceiving it as if, like, what was it, 10 to 11 dimensions where there's vibrating strings going on. So it's, what I'm trying to say is that there's this notion of potential energy, and when a person, let's say when you're standing, there's potential energy, and when you grab a cup of coffee, that's potential energy becomes kinetic energy. So it's as if like a potential state became a kinetic state. In that kinetic state, there was content. There was form-based content. Now, when we look at if we were to come back to the present and look at this again, keeping the present as the main checkpoint, we see, okay, so this implies that there were, in the earliest point of life, there were no human beings, there were no creatures. There was just potential energy. This potential energy became a world of matter, and then this world of matter after a very long time, so think of it this way, there's a world happening, an unconscious world happening, nobody home, nobody there to see it, no awareness to it, and then there is, and keep in mind I'm speaking through the scientific framework. There's a framework which is the philosophical framework I can speak through, and there's also the theological framework I can speak through. So what I'm trying to say is that there was an unconscious movement of matter, then a part of the earth separated from itself to a point where there's this great man by the name Alan Wilson Watts, where he says that the planet apple, just like a tree apples, the planet peopled, you know. And so there was the emergence of a body. That means limbs. This is one of the biggest mysteries of our species. Really, beyond evolutionary explanations, right? It's as if, why creaturehood? What part of an explosion at the beginning of time suggested that there's going to be creaturehood? And why this design of creaturehood? We understand that in some sense, the adaptation, we understand how a creature adjusts, but how the creature, you see, there's a mystery there. The original mystery of the geometry of the living creature. So we see that from this earth, a part of it separated and began through the development of limbs walking on this earth. Okay? This creature, I have in my own view, you know, there's some things that I see that are from before, and there are some things I see that are from before that I feel like sometimes I can put it into a different perspective and it's more accessible. So I saw in these talks of mine, if you look at earlier episodes, I speak about there being 4 phases to evolution. There was an unconscious world, then there was an unconscious self, the creature that was walking on the earth, but the creature had no consciousness. You know, maybe there was some instinctual awareness, but the creature had no idea it was somewhere, right? So it was just like a body moving on the earth. Now, from the unconscious self, which is the emergence of the body, then after a very long time, something unique happened where through evolution of an object, or think of it this way, an object became a subject somehow. Okay, where I feel if we just use evolutionary biology, it's incomplete. That means there is a sort of background evolutionary process going on, which I have termed it the subjective evolution. You know, now think of it this way. That this creature suddenly became conscious and there was a conscious self. So Jacques Lacan speaks of the mirror effect, where a child suddenly notices that what it sees in a mirror is itself, right? It's not something else. For example, you put a mirror they put a mirror in the forest in front of for wild animals, and it was a gorilla that looked in the mirror and felt it was another gorilla and just charged at the mirror. Do you see? So certain lesser species cannot tell apart what they are seeing as them or as something else. We as the human being have this capacity. Now, this conscious self emerged, and when the conscious self emerged, this is where I feel something incredible happened, where if existence was seen as a film, suddenly there came an ability to store this film and to replay this film over the film that is going on. So what that means is, it's imagine like you're sitting in a cinema, you're seeing a film, and then that film inspires you to create another film. And imagine we bring another projector and we project that film you created with your free will over the film that is playing in the cinema already. So layers from the unconscious world, we go towards the conscious, the unconscious self. From the unconscious self, we went towards the conscious self, where we are currently now. I have predicted there will come a fourth phase, the conscious world, where what we think is the individual biology is a phase. And then it will get to a point where I will explain it later on in the episode, the fourth phase. So far I'm trying to give a picture of how first the body emerged, and then the body ended up having a duality, the relationship of a self in a world. And so the self in the world is very supreme, because every person that wakes up, when you speak, you say I, you say I did this, I did that, I want this, I want that, I love this, I hate that, You see, so it's all being centered around a point of reference, which is subjective. And this is where I can say that I've explained enough about the past. And there is something else about the past, about the yogis and mystics, but I want to go towards the present and take this towards the future. So in the present, we find something interesting. After this creature became conscious that it is a body in a world, and going through, let's say, the processes of surviving in the fittest way, it began naming itself. That means it began having a subtler existence to itself, subtler experiential existence to itself. So this, after we named ourselves, what we did was that this creature that was making sophisticated mouth noises, we interlinked these mouth noises with something, with an object, and I forgot to mention, in my school of thought, I speak about the outer realm and the inner realm behind your eyes, where if you were to close your eyes and remember something that's happening in the inner realms, or if you open your eyes and you see something, right, there's the outer realms. Now the inner realm is like the greater onion layer. So whether your eyes are closed or not, you can visualize something. You could visualize words on a wall or numbers on a wall. You can close your eyes and visualize those numbers on a wall. So the inner realm is like the bigger onion layer, concentric sphere. So this creature established its individualism. We interlinked an outer image with sound, and that sound to an inner symbol, to a point where if somebody says apple, just makes that sound, the other person can see an image behind their eyes in their inner realms. So this is very crucial to realize, because the more we individualize, that means the more you go back in history, nature was just happening as one event, and then where consciousness and free will come into the picture, it's as if we are a sub-event inside nature's event. We are an experiential event inside an existential event. So this means that there was a natural environment, and for the first time, this human being, through the development of language, also through the development of technology such as tools, and also even going into tribes and whatnot, in some sense a natural environment began, there began being an unnatural, for now I'm going to call it unnatural environment in nature, right? Which means that it's like the film of the species began playing inside the film of nature. Now, when you look at human beings in 2021, right, you kind of see that we're like, again, 8 million creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. This is the biggest mystery. Everybody's pretty much an explorative end of time. And what happened is that we started giving meaning to the world. That means all our human knowledge is paint. It is artistic endeavor or inner realm symbolism that has been aligned towards outer realm reality. Now, in your inner realms, we say that there are, like the traditional way of speaking about it is that there's ideas, right? This was a misinterpretation, of course, of Rene Descartes' I think, therefore I am. So everybody's like, yo, man, I'm a thought right now. You know, that other person's a thought. This moment is a thought. But what it is that, first of all, in the outer realms we observe change, and anything that has form is in a state of change, right? That means we all know that our biological bodies have entered from our birth, and then when it comes time to exit, we will transition out of the state. But before we transition our individual life, there's like the individual's death, but then there's the death of a species. And an individual's death means that there is a barrier, or there is a block of the effort of the individual. That means when a person doesn't exist, their physical efforts have been, it's as if they have evaporated out of existence, okay? Now, keep this idea in mind that evaporation doesn't mean the particles are gone. It means the particles are moving faster. So what I'm saying is that there is, as the scholars say, actually, back in the day, they would say there's two worlds. There's the world where you were born, and then you, like from your birth date to your death date on the gravestone, that dash, that run from the beginning to the end of the individual life. Then there was a world here before you, and there will be the world here after you, and that's like the same world. So that means there is a known world that started with our consciousness, and there is an unknown world that it goes beyond the boundaries of our consciousness. And the cool way it's been designed is that human beings are just, that means there's unborn, think of it this way, unborn potential of human beings, and they arise. It's like waves. It's like right now, me being alive in 2021, I feel we're like a wave. Do you know? It's like I'm the wave of those who are alive now. You know, then this wave will finish, and then another wave will come, another wave will come, and this goes towards the notion of the future and how the human genetical pattern will echo on, right? Now, this is very important. When I say that there's a natural environment and then there's an unnatural environment, this means that two types of free will developed, okay? Now, free will is a very hard topic to speak about, because sometimes we look at free will and we're like, what do we have control over? It's all nature happening. But then there's moments where we're like, no, we are inputting specific codes of behaviorology into the moment, right? So you can say the free will is what moves before anything else moves in its environment, right? I think the purest moment of free will is when a person wakes up and their body does the first initial actions of, I don't know, you go wash your face or whatnot, you know. Now, what we find in nature, so there is an unnatural environment. The natural environment is, you can say, how our genetics is moving. And then there is influences from outside of our genetics called epigenetics. So it's not just like it's the jungle, there's the concrete jungle. And the concrete jungle, what comes with it is a sophistication of inner ways of acceptance of the world, subjective ways. So what that means is, like, society has laws, And these laws give society structure and also provide human beings an ability to function, systematically. Now, so many people want to break laws, but it took us like 4.5 billion years, 3.5 billion years to evolve to even be able to acknowledge law, or even anybody who's suffering right now. It took you 3.5 billion years to be able to even suffer, to be able to be aware that you're suffering. Right? So more than we should have our inner life kind of disturb our outer life, we have to realize that the inner life is an opportunity, an incredible evolutionary opportunity to adjust and navigate the outer life. And the inner life the inner realms are so fascinating, guys, that we are literally we haven't even touched and found, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of the vastness of the potential ways that a person can close their eyes and they can move or be part and parcel of a movement. So these creatures went into hunter-gatherer tribes. These hunter-gathering tribes, through the development of language, began having a sophistication and a sort of intrinsic sophistication where when a person knows the law of something, when they go into that space, it's as if they already know how to be in that space. And something we find both in nature and epigenetical influences. That means it's like if a tiger attacks you, that's a natural thing, but if somebody says something vocally to you, and then that language has an influence on who you are, that is definitely, you can say. I mean, the tiger attacking you is also epigenetical. It's kind of outside, but it's natural. Do you see what I mean? It's like there's a natural relationship and there's an unnatural relationship, and I'm saying unnatural because it's important to acknowledge what is different from the original nature. Now, when you look at human behavior, like right now, my body, when I look at my body, my heart, I'm not thinking about it. I'm not like, heart, keep beating. You can do it. It's like the heart is already beating as if it's the commander of its universe naturally. Do you see? And when I see, for example, my heart, my breathing, these are involuntary ways that I am happening as an entity, as an existential, as a biological creature, right? But I can't, for example, control my heartbeat, but I can control my hands. So there are certain dimensions to our biology that are in the domain of free will and certain things that are not. Right? Like I can move my physical body, but I can't raise my hand and have all skyscrapers raise into the air to see what the view would be of the first prototype of a sky city, you know what I mean? So, involuntary processes, the voluntary processes, the subjective self can mobilize, can navigate through, can pilot. The involuntary, we either are oblivious to it, it's in our unconscious, or if we're aware of it, we're like, what are you going to do? It's just nature. It's like the heart's just beating. It's like it doesn't need additional subjective interference with it, So, so in the natural environment, there's involuntary processes and voluntary processes. Now, in the unnatural environment, when it comes to the inner realm and the ideological landscape of the individual, the psychological landscape of the individual, the psyche of the individual, there I have personally experienced, and I think many people are like this too, where sometimes you, like if somebody asks you a question, you feel like you're coming up with thoughts, but if you're just walking and suddenly you get various ideas and these ideas come and go. So there is something that just like in the outer realms, we see like our environment change, the inner realms also, it's like an environment that is changing, and what we pick up on, we tend to think that we are creating. So this implies that behind your eyes, the mind is like a river. Okay, and it's like when a person is having thoughts as they think, or generating thoughts, it's as if their hand is in that river with a cup, and that cup, the small cup, is capturing certain ideas that it can vocalize. And my relationship personally with my inner realms it's very cinematic for me. There was a time it was structured in language, but language, when you realize that it's just harboring an image, it's there for an image. That means when you read a book fast, it's as if it's just ink on paper, but behind your eyes in that space of imagination, it's becoming a film, and then the person wants to read the book faster to see what's going to happen at the end. That's as if the film in their inner realms is accelerating, you know. So, in the present, so far in my explanation, I feel I've covered the major points, and what I want to say is that we have certain range of voluntary control, and we also have in the outer realms, and certain range of voluntary control in the inner realms, right? So there we have subjective free will and objective free will. Okay. The subjective free will is actually way more. That means a person can sit down, like I can right now, my hands are on the table, okay? Like my arms are on this table that my laptop is on, but I can close my eyes and visualize my arms waving in the air. See, in the inner realms, there is a freedom that in the outer realms one cannot access. So, this all brings it to the present, where I've written here, involuntary processes of nature became voluntary. Yeah. So now we go towards the future. So a little bit about the title, Echo of the Human Pattern. The thing about an echo, that it goes forth, makes contact with something, and then the wave, in some sense, may go through what it has made contact, but may also reflect back in some sense. And when I say the echo of the human pattern beyond humanity, it's like I'm asking, like, what will happen to the human idea in the future? Now I've drawn a diagram here which I can't show, but one by one I'm going to explain the possibilities, and this is where think of it that it's one man's vision of how the future, how future probabilities can emerge. And keep in mind, as Aristotle said, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. I am not here trying to tell people this is what's going to happen. I'm here to say that as I have access to a unique DNA, just like everybody else, this is how far my eyes have gone. You know, so it's as if we are hunter-gatherers of the inner realms now, and there's a responsibility of every human being to be able to share honestly, so we have high-quality content, you know, honestly share how their eyes are experiencing a life that surpasses the sensory appearance of their body. This is very important, especially when it comes to the hard problem of consciousness and how we can measure and calculate and theorize things that happen in two moments, more than one moment, but something that is instantaneous. It's as if there is no other moment to check it. Do you see? It's as if attention and existence is being us right now. The existence attributed to energy, the attention, this is where theology, philosophy come in. Some people attribute the attention to energy. Some people attribute the attention to an inconceivable universal intelligence, or beyond the universe intelligence. And philosophers, they're way more open-minded. That means a philosopher appreciates questions more than answers in a changing world. So, I'll start from here, that I was thinking, alright, there's the human species. The human being has a specific psychology. We're calling it human now. It's as if civilized behavior that cares for this additional dimension of subjective laws that has been overlaid upon just meaningless matter. And that's really the human ability, where it was as if this creature was four-limbed, it stood up on its two legs, right? It began wearing clothing, it began entering transport, and it began just leading towards sophistication and creativity. So I was thinking, alright, right now we are, you can say we're human beings with human personalities, or the persona is being acknowledged through the human lens. Now, what can happen to the human idea, right? So the human idea, one thing we're seeing is cross-species communication. For example, everybody who is a pet owner, right, they talk to their pet. I've noticed this. I don't have pets personally. But I've seen pet owners, and I've seen how they talk to their pets as if somebody calls their dog and it's like, good boy, when the dog listens. Do you see? So it's as if we have this human sphere, we have this human psychology, and we imbue this into not just objects, but into other species. So the dog or the cat is a family member. It's not just like, do you see what I mean? There's that sort of affinity, you know, with the creature. Right, so it's as if something that happens is we are, in some sense, kind of like a teacher sharing our psychology with other species. I thought about this in the sense of not just creatures that are like warm-blooded or cold-blooded or big, but in some sense I thought if we could somehow enlarge insects, maybe if a human being behaved with that insect could kind of fall and fit into those behavioral patterns of the human archetype. Okay. So the human idea can be transferred potentially to other species successfully. It could be that it's not just the chimp that has had a head start or is unique. It could be that in the way future, all the animals that we think they are just oblivious to the levels of consciousness that the human being experiences, the Homo sapien experiences. We may be able to transfer the pattern. So in the future, maybe dogs are standing on two legs, behaving like human beings, talking about politics. Or there was this photo, I don't know who the artist was, but it was like a bunch of dogs playing poker. You know? Now, so one relationship is the human being with other natural animalistic species. The other relationship I've written here is that the human idea may go towards cloning, right? This may be a bit bizarre and something that maybe people may feel foreign to listening to, but I would say that I was thinking of it that, okay, let me before that explain another dimension. Let me explain cyberspace and technology. So imagine that right now a person can communicate to other animals, let's say other species, natural species. Now imagine when, let's say, robots come into the picture. Ray Kurzweil, this futurist, has considered that in the year 2050, In the year 2050, hold on guys, I gotta change this music. In the year 2050 or around that time, human beings will develop technology that will update itself faster than we can control it. So the emergence of super intelligent computers, and if there is an intelligent computer, you can say human beings are playing a game of intelligence, and there's a chance that this intelligent computer wants to fit in. You know, some people feel that when advanced AI opens its eyes, it's going to destroy us like Terminator movie or something, you know. But I will tell you, I don't think so. I think if it is truly super intelligent, this intelligence will quickly realize that there is nothing. It's literally, they call this, what was it called? I forget the name of it, but it's as if something in philosophy where they say, where are the aliens? That means, well, why are so many other planets not inhabited? Or why is it empty? Why is it so quiet? Why is it as if the human species is the first in the room of universal consciousness? Or galactic consciousness? So, anyways, this AI may not destroy us. It may choose to integrate into human societal living. So that would mean human beings will be able to, in some sense, teach computers that have so many AI, let's say robots, that have such variations that it's not like a robot has a soul, but it has a you can say it has a programmed mind of such sophisticated programming where it can resemble like a mind of its own. Do you see? Because our behavior has to do with information, and currently we're in the information age. So pretty much we have the emergence of robots, and there could be this thing where, I mean, I'll talk about clones and I'll get into that secondary point about cyberspace. So another thing that can happen is that there can be clones in the future, and there could be clones of the human being which are humanoid looking when I'm talking about this robotic thing, and there can be a term I've put here, machinoid or mechanoid. These are terms that I've generated. I felt it was fitting. So what that means is that right now we have one biological body, and we're considering we have one mind. But if in the future the space of our mind through cyberspace can become vaster and greater, it could be that a person is born with one biological body, but then they have let's say 7 android bodies, where the person is like sitting at a table drinking a cup of tea, and one android body is getting groceries, one android body is like, doing something else. Do you see? You know, they're like, so it means sort of beyond the boundaries of the biology, through the development of that space of mind interconnecting, connecting with cyberspace, with a cyberspace mind. In some sense, there comes the ability of multiple bodyhood. Now, this multiple bodyhood could imply that it's as if these clones of the self can look human, or they could literally look like machines moving around, right? So it could, when I say humanoid and machinoid, the machinoid, it doesn't resemble, it has the limbs and body of like a human, but it's like a machine, like it's like a walking computer. In regards to the hardware, but in regards to those that are humanoid, it could be that in the future there's going to be human beings walking around which are such advanced technology that you can't tell apart if they're a clone or if they're an actual human being. Do you see? So what I'm saying is that it's as if the human pattern can be transferred to machines. In a script I wrote a while back, I predicted, I think the year, I don't remember the exact year I projected, I think it was 2089, something like that, where I predicted that, not predicted, it was like I saw this parallel possibility that, you know how like you see in movies, there's this family sitting at this dinner table, and the daughter looks at the father and it's like, I want a tattoo, do you know, and the father's like, no daughter of mine is gonna get a tattoo, do you know. Now imagine in the future, like there's a child, and this child comes to the parents like, Dad, Mom, everybody's a robot at school, do you know, I want to be a robot, do you know what I mean? And the father gets angry, no daughter of mine's gonna be a robot, right? And so it could imply that human beings begin replacing their body parts to a point where it's as if robots acting human. There is no more biological life, right? It's as if the person wanted a better hand, got a robotic hand, better, like different body parts became robotic. Eventually it was as if, again, like robots behaving like human beings. So that could be a sort of future of the human idea if we are too careless and reckless of the natural gift that, or the gift of Mother Earth, you can say. If we don't value that, then of course. Plus, the more if we consider life as just a chemical hallucination too, from the materialistic perspective, if we just zoom in on that only, not consider additional dimensions through a multidimensional view, it could be that we're like, okay, the human being has a lifespan of 100 years, but if somebody transfers their consciousness to a machine body, they can live thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It would be a sort of artificial immortality. Do you know? So pretty much the human design can be transferred to other species, natural species. That can be transferred to machines, and a dimension of that being clones. And that point, second point I wanted to make about cyberspace, is just fitting into how we're going to become machines. That was it. Not that we're going to become, there's a possibility, there's a probability. These are all probabilities, as if there's a point that right now, which is the present, and I'm wondering about the different directions that this ship can sail in unknown waters of time. There could be also see interference with the biology. There is something, we call it like they call it in scientific circles just genetic biologists, where they say it's like vertical gene transfer and horizontal gene transfer. Vertical gene transfer is what we find now, you know, but through natural reproduction. But if you were to see like horizontal gene transfer, it could imply that just genetically we get to a point where if a person sees somebody with blonde hair, they suddenly their hair can become blonde. So there could be a potential of a shape-shifting, you know, civilization, natural civilization in the future. But I feel that's another sort of inner extinction. You see, in these talks of mine, I've mentioned it before as well. I talk about outer extinction, inner extinction. Outer extinction is it like if a meteor hits us or somebody hits a nuclear bomb and there is no more human species. Inner extinction is if we transfer, like if we become robots, that's a sort of natural inner extinction, okay, of the human species. If suddenly everybody becomes violent and cruel and we descend to animals, it's as if what was once the human idea has returned to the cave of savageness, no longer human, right? So there is always the possibility of the vanishing of the human idea, but that is not our aim. Our aim is to, as a species, as 8 billion creatures on a rock, intelligent creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, is to develop so many strategies and backup systems that in some sense we don't suffer, we don't go on the road towards inner extinction or outer extinction. The other possibility I've written here, what can happen to the human concept, is that alien life forms appear, okay, beyond the atmosphere, okay? So what this means is that We have the concept of alien immigration now, but what I'm talking about is actual alien immigration. So imagine in the future of the human species, there will come a moment where extraterrestrials land, and we're all expecting them to be violent, but they're actually very compassionate, kind, bodhisattvic extraterrestrials, okay? Now, these extraterrestrials, they decide to enter human society, right? And let's say in the future, it's not just bodhisattvic extraterrestrial. Let's say it's just, it reaches a point where the leaders of the human effort and the leaders of that extraterrestrial effort, in some sense, come up with some contract or agreement where some human beings have gone to the planet of those extraterrestrials and are living there, and some extraterrestrials have come to Earth and they're living among us. Okay, so it would be as if a time where you're walking in the street. In my science fiction novel, which is unpublished at the moment, I've worked on this. I've created settings of this. So it would be as if you're walking in the street and you're seeing androids walking, you're seeing holograms of people, you can say cyber wisps of people walking, and then you can also see extraterrestrials walking. And imagine an extraterrestrial goes to a human coffee shop and it's like, can I have a coffee? And then there's like human beings who are like, no man, this is humans only. And the extraterrestrial goes and says, hey, I'm a member of the human civilization, I'm a citizen of this planet too. It's as if the human being, you see, the human, what we consider the human is not just objective, it is also subjective. So something that behaves like a human has a sort of connection to the human image, you see. So there's the relationship with alien life forms, and imagine there's like a enlightened guru on Earth, and extraterrestrials have become disciples of this enlightened guru. Like in what do you call it? There was a man in Indian culture. He's known by the name of Rishi Vyasa, and he's written this great epic of the Mahabharata, this written work, and he's also written the Srimad Bhagavatam and also the Puranas, an incredibly advanced communicator and pilot of humanity. And so in the Mahabharata, there's stories, and there's also resemblances to this in also ancient Greek as well, where the gods come down to meet humans, okay? So in the Mahabharata, like there's celestial deities that come down to meet the human. When you look at, for example, Greek mythology, like Hercules, it was as if Zeus came down to Earth and, had a good time, and Hercules appeared. So, it could be a suggestion of the human idea transfers to life forms that are beyond the atmosphere, that perhaps even may have not been developed through oxygenated environments, Because we are carbon-based life forms. I mean, from a chemist's view, that is what's going on, That is what the major constitution of us. So I got to the point where there's alien life forms, and what have I written here? Oh, and it could be that extraterrestrials, when this is way in the future where there's alien immigration, actual alien immigration, right, where extraterrestrials and human beings have children. This would be a kind of like, there's this anime called Hero Academia, and this could be the suggestion of the world where it's as if every person is born with a unique ability or a unique special trait. It's as if, like, let's say a child of a extraterrestrial and a terrestrial creature would in some sense be like a child who has the eyes of an extraterrestrial but the human body of a human body, right? And it could be that there is already this level of sophistication. It could be that there are things that have already happened in this world that we don't have the eyes to see. Light is, like they say, there's the electromagnetic spectrum, and a certain range of that electromagnetic spectrum is the translation of light beams in some sense into sensory phenomena, correct? So that's where the physical notion of the human ideal will go. This picture that I chose for this wallpaper, for this episode, not only was it one of the most fascinating works of art, like this deserves to be a couple $1 million work of art, you know, but it is a proper depiction of the sophistication of the human being, and in some sense how Earth was not just our home, but the Milky Way galaxy became our home, you know. In something to share about time, in my science fiction novel titled The Messenger of Giants, it's set in the year 5025, and I've done something very interesting in there where all the people in the year 5025 are divided between two categories, the traditionalists and the futurists. The futurists are those who consider that they are eternal, so there may be extraterrestrials that don't die, you know, even though human beings die, right? It could be that androids, when they have a sort of conscious capacity of individual identity, you know, they may feel like they can't die, like a machine, like it's as if the consciousness of an android is just like some computer somewhere, you know. And there's a sentence here which I should have probably read at the beginning, but I'll read it here just to have it recorded. I've written here, what we call human is based on biology and culture. Both can change humanity, right? So this picture right now is a depiction of how the culture of the human framework has extended, or maybe it's there also prior to us knowing. So the human concept can completely change what a human being may, if we are around that long, right? What a human being is maybe a sophisticated level, you know, maybe a completely different type of human being than we see now, you know. So, dear listeners, so far this has been the explanation of what will happen to the physical components of the behavior and the culture, the genetics and the epigenetics. There are probably many other variations of this. It could be that in the future, when I was saying that human beings, like let's say animals, so it could be, imagine a nightclub in the future where for a fashion statement there's like a human being in the nightclub and he's standing at the bar and he has the head of like the Sphinx, not the Sphinx, like it has the head of Anubis in Greek in Egyptian mythology. Or for example, there is the idea of Horus, where in some sense he's seen as the sky god, which he has the head of a pigeon. So you can totally see ways where it's like what is now fashion that is being laid overlaid upon the body of the human can be genetical differences in the future. So it could be like a person can genetically change themselves. You see, for example, there was this incredible, you can say, the world's first superstar by the name of Michael Jackson. And Michael Jackson, he was born with he was African American, but he changed the color of his skin. So in the future, we don't know how sophisticated technology could be, that it means it's like human skin can become purple, or can become orange, or can become light blue. Who knows? Do you know what I mean? So there can be changes like that. Now, towards the metaphysics, this is what I have spoken about in other talks. I would say, so the human concept, instead of being identified with its objective realm and its subjective realm, which is a specific idea, which is also a specific form, we can totally see that even in the words human being, we see there's the human component which is formed, and then there's the being. So this is the point I wanted to make about the ancient mystics and yogis, okay? And also to connect the point of the fourth phase of evolution, the conscious world. So it was an unconscious world, there came an unconscious self. From the unconscious self, we went towards the conscious self, and then there is the fourth phase, the conscious world. Now, what I mean by the conscious world, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you look at what is going on, rather than human beings endlessly passing down the torch of the human framework, it may be that being a human being and having individual free will is a phase of nature. And in the very far future, in my work in Civilization 2.0, I've predicted it 3,600 years from now, but where in Sky Cities we will be making the decision. But it could be that we transcend altogether the human idea, not just transferring it to technologies, not transforming it into other life forms, not just transferring it to a shape-shifting genetical position, but in some sense, what is the human idea and concept can be a station, can be an intermediary phase. And there's this poets from 700 years ago by the name of the Sufi mystic poet by the name of Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. And Rumi, in his poem, he says, I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Consider this to be a sort of subjective, the essence of the subjective evolution. And then he says, I died as animal and I was man. He says, why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on to that which no mind has ever conceived. And then there's two more lines which I don't remember the line after. I think he says something where like exists. I don't know what it is. It's like a subject sings in organ tones, and all except God doth perish. He uses the term God, but you can see God being another term for the source cosmic intelligence. Okay, the source of the cosmos being an intelligent thing. That means, for example, in polytheistic traditions, in Vedic thought, it's as if 3 days of Brahman sleeping is equivalent to, like, I don't know, 54 million years of human life, or universal life. So it's as if we are God's dream, and eventually God wakes up from the dream, and so what we thought was the evolutionary scheme of just creaturehood is suddenly, it's as if just like when you have a dream and you wake up, it's like the dream is no more, but the dream was a phase of for the universal consciousness, let's say. So it could be, and there is also another possibility, more towards the physical, I'll say this, where it could be, I talk about often an advanced civilization being the greatest thing we can do in the outer realms, and in the inner realms, advancing communication to be the greatest thing. Now this can advance to a point where we realize it's one singular field of intelligence, and it's as if it's like what we're considering the mind that is holding the human framework as a response, as a reaction to the human embodiment towards the biological, as a reaction to the biological body. It could be that we're particles in a field, and these particles move so fast that they, just like there's a drop, there's ice melts, it becomes liquid, and then the liquid evaporates into gas. It could be that an advanced civilization begins going faster than the speed of light, and it's advancing so quickly that it becomes invisible. So it could in some sense be the echo of the human pattern can fade as if it's moving so quick it's invisible. Or it could be that all these particles that are in time, as Plato says, time is the moving image of eternity. It's as if on one side of the coin we're in time, pass towards the future, but in the other side of the coin, it's a singular intelligent eternity, and an intelligence that is unconditional to form. So this means that the body has shape, the mind, it has semi-shape, and this idea of the soul, or 100% the unknown intelligence, that unknown intelligence can surpass all shape, right? Even universal shape. So I am saying that what the future route of the future traveling route of the human concept could go towards being a field, just a field of intelligence, a field of activity, as if we are eyes in space, or I shouldn't say eyes in space, we are sight in space. I termed it in one of the talks empty seeing. So we say that there's matter and space. In Vedic thought, they call this Purusha, Purusha being Prakriti, and Prakriti being matter, Purusha being the awareness, the consciousness, the matter. So it could be that we access, as the Bhagavad Gita says, the divine Purusha. And the divine Purusha means that it's as if the way out of the wheel of karma that also Buddhism perceived. In Vedic yogic thought, it's like we're in samsara. So how Sam and Sarah get out of samsara is that they become liberated from an attachment of sight. So what that means is it's as if the soul is moving in matter, and then the soul realizes it is also moving in space, or I should say it is space. So that means, imagine every human being right now. I gave a talk before this one, post-collective global realizations, where you can imagine as if like there is no more personalities. The era of the persona comes to an end, and we all realize that energy has never changed. A part of energy has never changed, because it can't be created and destroyed, and creation and destruction is change. So there is also, this is more closer, the theological framework sees it as if establishing a relationship with God, where the idea of faith comes in, and God is the inconceivable truth. And so eventually you become this inconceivable truth, as if the person's like, wait, or I would say it like this: Ralph Waldo Emerson and his disciple Henry David Thoreau, both of these guys, Ralph Waldo Emerson started something called American Transcendentalism. And in American Transcendentalism, Ralph Waldo Emerson was saying that everybody has a soul. The soul is the extension of God in man, in the flesh. So if a person goes into nature and becomes acquainted with their soul, becomes, in some sense, learns from their soul or has a relationship with their soul, they're actually having a relationship with the universal source intelligence, right? So it could be that the human idea is particle-based, and in the future we all become fields, right? We become a singular field of intelligence. That means there is no more variations or change. It becomes a universe that has nothing else to do anymore. It is. So far, ladies and gentlemen, this is how far I have viewed it. We are 8 billion human beings. Every person should attempt this challenge. It is, you can say, our birthright to tackle the big questions. Okay, it doesn't matter who you are. There is no such thing as stupid or smart people. Everybody has a different intelligence. There are those who put an effort in activating their intelligence, and there are those who, in some sense, they become more like a passenger in the world, where they're like they want the world to carry them, but we can pilot. So free will is a rare opportunity to access the greater context of the human idea. You know, this concludes this episode, but now I'm going to just say some casual things. I have often thought of the term relationship, and a relationship is literally, let me say it like this, that there was a person by the name of Buckminster Fuller and Marshall McLuhan. And both of these gentlemen use the term spaceship Earth. That means we are travelers. We are traveling in the space-time continuum on this rock in the middle of nowhere. Now, we are crew members, but we haven't realized it. It's as if, because there is nobody holding, there is no captain to the ship holding like the steering wheel of the ship. Okay, imagine like the whole species, this giant boat in unknown waters, and then it's as if there's 8 billion human beings on this boat. It's as if, because there is no captain, people associated that anybody can do whatever they want, right? And this is true. Of course you can, because you're alive once, and you should. But at the same time, it is also part of the privilege of the free will to attain some sort of discipline of organized action. This means that human beings, there is inner conflict. So what this means is there's a civil war going inside the species, because we're all identifying with the truth of our eyes first than anything else. So I feel that this crew member dynamic is going to shine more and more, and all those people who are experiencing synchronicities, it's as if you are finding more and more your role. That means everybody has a different role, kind of like a soccer game. You know, I could even connect this to a theological metaphor, where it's as if there's a soccer game and there's a referee and there's a coach outside, and at the same time there's a stadium, you know, as if the angels are watching what the human beings are doing. And so God is like the coach. Or you can say emissaries of truth are like the coach. But either way, it's as if there is a game and there are boundaries. There is an outline, there's a certain field, and in this field you can't have the goalkeeper suddenly run and score a goal, because then the goal would be empty. You can't have the defenders try to be like mid laners. Everybody is born, usually what we think in a meaningless context, and then you got to create the meaning. But I will tell you, as we abide by our true nature, as the ancient mystics suggested, we will come to realize that it's as if we are collaborating, not with just physical intelligence, physical entities. We are collaborating with a field of intelligence, that we have been in before we are here, that we are before we are in somewhere. And something that is really important, I have realized, is that we need to have such multidimensional patience. That means people, not only that we need to stop judgment, but we need to realize that you can judge a person infinitely. You can infinitely think somebody is good. You can infinitely think somebody is bad. As long as there's energy, there can be new framework imposed on what you see. So, instead of all human beings trying to be one thing, as if thinking that success means we all have to be the same thing, that's a civilization of clones, and that's kind of freaky. It's as if every person has to realize that we have emerged in nature, and it's important to play our role. That means let's say, whether it's a gardener watering flowers, or if there's a teacher in school teaching students, do you see, or if there is, for example, like an astronaut in space exploring, they're all crew members of Spaceship Earth. And in my view, if you want to use Mr.Withinian language, it's as if the advanced civilization is waiting. And when you hear the song of the advanced civilization and you find the love of your species, I will tell you, there is something known as self-worth, where you look at yourself in the mirror, but then there are those who look in the mirror and they realize the whole universe is also being seen in the mirror. The whole universe is behind them. That means we are all with each other, present as a great fire of intelligence, being passed down to generations to tackle the unknown and the darkness of reality. You see, beyond love and hate, which is a dualistic notion, there will come a sort of state where nobody can call it love or hate. It will just be natural acceptance of what is. There is nothing to fear, because what fears dies. It's temporary. And so, if there is a possibility, 0.00 or whatever amount of zeros you want, 1% possibility, that we are multidimensional, rather than fearing the end of one dimension, it makes more sense to understand the other dimensions. So this means, when the Dalai Lama said compassion, this compassion has to be universal. So not that you just care for planetary compassion, where you care for what's in your planet, but you must reach a certain point where we have a compassionate outlook, where imagine human beings become so advanced that we go to another planet and we are the aliens, we are the extraterrestrials to their terrestrial notion, right? So it would, as if we would require to have compassion and decency, because life can either stop or it can advance. And those who don't care for advancement, you in some sense dismiss your own greater opportunities. Why else would we be 8 billion individuals on a rock in the middle of nowhere? If it was a solipsistic universe, it's as if only your eyes would have been here, right? But because there's many eyes here, that means there's a work that these eyes require to go forth towards, the great work of eons, of effort, of intelligence. So anyways, guys, the future is definitely going to be exciting, and we are the ones who will pave the road for the future generations. There was this fictional character in this show, Shingeki no Kyojin. I try to share this as much as I can. There was a character, they were in this extinction scenario, and there's this commander called Erwin Smith, and this soldier who's scared, and they all may die in the show. So this soldier says, "Is life meaningless?" And this commander shouts and he says, "No, life is not meaningless. We find our meaning in living for those who will find the meaning one day." Do you see? That means there are problems and questions staring at us right now that we may not have the technology or the ability or the type of attention to acknowledge or to do anything about, but the future generations may, and so we live for their eyes as much as we live for our own eyes, and that is how civilization advances. And the echo of the human pattern, the more important than what happens to it is the journey. As Matsuyo Basho, the Zen master, says, the journey itself is my home. It's not about just getting to somewhere. It's about how you walked while you were existing. Do you see? This is the whole idea of mindfulness. And those who are kind, they have I would say an acuity, an accuracy that comes from mindfulness. For what is left now is for human beings to unleash the greatest efficiency of their inner realms out onto the outer realms. The world is waiting for the eyes of our eyes. And so the advanced communicators will build the airport for the future pilots to come. For this whole universe, it's like in space, guys. We're on a rock in the middle of space and something is happening. What greater divinity can you ask for? It is now. Rise, mankind, rise. Thank you for listening. I'll be on Discord for those interested. Much blessings and peace.